Sagittarius, the soul connection that doesn't leave, the love you've always searched for. You are not looking for just love, Sagittarius. You are looking for the one that stays. The kind of connection that doesn't ask you to dim your fire, play smaller, or edit yourself into something easier to love. You want the love that sees you exactly as you are and says, yes, stay that way. This love isn't loud or chaotic. It doesn't need to be proven every day. It simply exists, steady and unshakable, like it's always been there, waiting for you to notice. Maybe you've thought such love was unrealistic, a fairy tale told to make people hope. Maybe you've even settled for almost loves, relationships that looked perfect on paper but felt hollow in your chest. You told yourself, this is good enough, even when deep down you knew it wasn't. Because what you've been searching for is not perfection, it's resonance. That deep, quiet knowing that you have finally been found, without conditions, without performance. And here's the truth you might not have dared to believe. This love is real. It's woven from the same threads as your soul, and it does not arrive because you chase it. It arrives because you've come home to yourself enough to recognize it when it appears. Stay with me, Sagittarius. Let's talk about how to see it, how to feel it, and how to know when it's finally in your hands. Gate 1. The hollow spaces you couldn't name. Sagittarius, you've been in love before. Or at least you've been in something that looked like love. On the outside it seemed right, good conversation, shared goals, occasional tenderness. You told yourself this is what love should be. Steady, practical, impressive. You ticked the boxes. You smiled for the pictures. You tried to be grateful. But deep in your chest there was always something missing. A silence between the words. A gap between touch and meaning. A stillness that didn't feel peaceful but empty. You kept waiting for that missing piece to fall into place. Maybe if we travel more, maybe if we grow up a little, maybe if I change a little, less intense, less sensitive, more agreeable. You thought maybe it was you. Maybe you were asking for too much. Maybe your longing for something deeper was unrealistic. A flaw of being too idealistic. But Sagittarius, let's name the truth you've known all along. What you were missing wasn't a detail. It was a frequency. The quiet ache you've carried wasn't about needing more effort, more gifts, more attention. It was about not being seen. You've been in rooms full of people laughing, smiling, even held, but still felt completely alone. You've nodded through conversations that never touched your core. You've shared a bed and still felt like no one heard the language your heart was speaking. That isn't drama. That isn't weakness. That is a soul crying out for its match. Not a perfect person, but someone whose presence feels like your inner world finally has a mirror. I once worked with a Sagittarius woman named Alina. She was in a long-term relationship that, in her words, had everything going for it. Her partner was kind, reliable, intelligent. Their families got along. They had plans to marry. But each time Alina imagined her future, she felt a strange hollowness. It's like I'm building a life on perfectly arranged furniture, she said. But the house doesn't have a roof. She laughed with him but never cried with him. She shared stories but never truths. He loved her personality, but didn't seem to recognize her soul. And that slowly began to unravel her from the inside. You see, Sagittarius, the human heart can survive a lack of drama, can survive routine, but it cannot thrive in the absence of resonance. When you're with someone who doesn't meet you on a soul level, your spirit begins to contract. You feel it in small ways. Less excitement in your voice, less vulnerability in your body, less magic in your gaze. You start choosing silence over truth, politeness over passion. You tell yourself you're maturing. But what you're really doing is negotiating away pieces of your essence, just to feel less alone in something that was never meant to hold you. It's like being in a crowd where everyone is speaking a language you don't know. They're not unkind. They smile at you. Some even try to connect. But no one really gets you. No one understands the jokes you haven't told out loud, the fears you've never named, the dreams that live too deep for surface-level love. And the deepest part of you, the wild, radiant, searching part, begins to whisper, "This isn't it." Not because you're ungrateful, not because you're restless, but because your soul remembers what real connection feels like, even if your mind hasn't seen it yet. So let's call the emptiness what it truly is. Sacred information. A compass, not a curse. When you feel that ache in your chest, that quiet sense of not belonging even when things look perfect, that is your soul saying, I'm still waiting for someone who sees me before I speak. You don't need more chemistry. You need more truth. You don't need more excitement. You need more recognition. The kind that doesn't just flirt with your surface but moves toward the core of who you are and says, I see you there, and I want to know more. But here's where the pain deepens. Sometimes the people you love are not capable of meeting you there. It's not their fault. They may love you in the way they know how, but they may not be tuned to your depth, your wildness, your inner language. And staying in that space, hoping it will change, often feels lonelier than being alone, because it teaches you day after day that who you are in your fullness is too much, too intense, too poetic, too complicated. So you start to show less, feel less, ask for less, until one day you look around and realize that you've built a life that looks like yours, but doesn't feel like home. Sagittarius, you were never wrong for longing. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking for the right frequency. And that longing, that quiet, relentless ache, is the first sign that your soul is searching for its mirror. Not someone to complete you, not someone to fix you, but someone whose presence says, you don't have to try here. Just be, and you will know it when it comes. But before that, you must learn to honor the ache without silencing it. You must learn to trust that what you're feeling is not a flaw to fix, but a signpost pointing to something real. You must learn to say, yes, this looks good, but I don't feel seen. And allow yourself to leave, even when there's nothing technically wrong. Because the absence of pain is not the same as the presence of love. The first step to finding soul-level connection is admitting that the ones before never touched your soul. They may have held your hand, but not your truth. They may have liked your fire, but never dared to sit with your shadow. That emptiness you've been carrying? It's not there to torture you. It's there to prepare you for the love that doesn't leave. Gate 2: the resonance beyond logic. Sagittarius, when you meet the one who resonates with your soul, it will not feel like an explosion. It will not feel like a grand unveiling, or the chaotic passion that burns bright but dies fast. It will feel like recognition, not in your mind but in your body, like walking into a room you've never seen before, and knowing exactly where everything belongs. Like hearing a song you didn't realize you knew the words to until your heart starts singing along. This kind of connection doesn't come to complete you, it comes to awaken you. And no, it doesn't always make sense. It may defy logic. They may not look like what you expected. They may not fit the list you once thought defined your type. But something happens the moment your eyes meet. A quiet hush falls over the noise in your mind, and all that's left is presence, familiarity, home. Many spiritual traditions teach that every soul carries a frequency. Some call it an energetic signature, some call it karma, others call it destiny. But all agree on this: certain souls are tuned to yours. When you meet them, you don't fall, you remember. You don't analyze, you feel. You don't prepare, you soften. I once worked with a Sagittarius named Aiden, a fiercely independent traveler who never believed in soulmates. He'd had relationships that were passionate, practical, even loving, but always fleeting. Then one day, in a remote cafe in a city he hadn't planned to visit, he met someone who didn't try to impress him, didn't flatter him, didn't even flirt. She simply saw him. Not the adventurer, not the persona. She saw the boy underneath, the one who had never stopped asking big questions, who still looked at the stars for answers. It wasn't a spark, he told me. It was a knowing. Like she had already read the chapters of me I hadn't written yet. That's the resonance we're talking about. Not chemistry, recognition. And you'll know it because you'll stop trying to be chosen. You'll stop reaching. You'll stop performing. Your nervous system will settle in their presence. Your thoughts will slow down. You'll feel not excitement but ease. And if you're not used to that, if your past experiences have taught you that love must come with tension, anxiety, chasing, then ease might even feel unfamiliar at first. You might confuse it with boredom. You might think, but where's the thrill? But listen closely, Sagittarius. The thrill that depletes you is not love. The thrill that makes you question your worth is not love. The true thrill of resonance is subtle, steady, slow burning. It grows, not explodes. It builds, not breaks. And it stays. You will not have to fight to be seen in this kind of connection. You will not have to explain your silence, or translate your emotions, or apologize for your intensity. They will understand your rhythm. They will hear the music underneath your words. And you will stop wondering if you're too much, because for the first time you will feel met exactly as you are. This kind of love doesn't arrive because you chased it. It arrives because you aligned with it. That's why it can't be forced or found on demand. It shows up when your frequency becomes clear, when you've peeled away the layers of people-pleasing, of proving, of settling for connection that only touches your surface. It finds you when you've stopped running from yourself. And when it finds you, Sagittarius, there will be a quiet unfolding. Not a performance, but a presence. Not a fairy tale, but a homecoming. You'll talk for hours but feel like you've barely started. You'll sit in silence and feel completely full. You'll be surprised by how much you want to share, not because you need to, but because you feel safe enough to. But you must be ready for it. Because resonance doesn't only feel beautiful, it feels real. And real can be confronting. Real sees through your masks. Calls you to be soft when you're used to being strong. To receive when you're used to giving. To be vulnerable when you're used to being admired. Real asks for you, not your performance, not your potential. And sometimes that can be terrifying. This is why many people walk away from resonance when it finally arrives. They think it's too quiet, too calm, too unfamiliar. But that's not because it's wrong. It's because it's true. And truth is rarely loud. It whispers. It invites. It doesn't chase. So when it comes, you must be still enough to feel it, awake enough to recognize it, and brave enough to stay. You see, Sagittarius, the love you've been searching for isn't somewhere out there. It's moving toward you in rhythm with the parts of yourself you're reclaiming. The more you soften into who you really are, the clearer your frequency becomes. And the clearer your frequency becomes, the more visible you become to the ones who are already tuned to it. So trust the longing you carry. Trust that it's leading you somewhere real. And when you find that connection, the one that doesn't ask you to explain, impress, or chase, pause. Breathe. Look into their eyes. And remember what you once thought didn't exist. Does. Gate 3. The conditions for soul-level love to appear. Sagittarius, soul-level love does not appear when you're chasing it. It does not arrive in the moments when you're desperately trying to be chosen, when you're overextending to be seen, when you're editing yourself to be more likable or desirable. It shows up when you stop running, not from others but from yourself. When you are no longer seeking someone to fill a void, but someone to share a wholeness. The truth is, this kind of love doesn't answer longing that comes from lack. It answers presence that comes from self-remembering. There is a common illusion that we must find love to feel whole. But the path to soul connection begins when you become whole enough that you no longer chase love. You recognize it. You don't crave it from a place of emptiness. You receive it from a place of alignment. The shift is subtle, but it is everything. You are no longer begging the world to choose you. You are choosing yourself first, again and again, until your life becomes the very frequency that invites what is meant to stay. I once worked with a Sagittarius named Amy, a warm and magnetic woman who kept falling for emotionally unavailable partners. Each time she believed this one might be different, until the pattern repeated. She came to me not asking, "Why do they keep leaving?" but "Why do I keep picking?" That was the moment her healing began. We didn't start by finding her new love. We started by clearing the overgrowth. The need to be needed. The fear of abandonment. The hidden belief that maybe she was only lovable if she earned it. She let go of people who didn't meet her where she was. She sat with the silence. She learned to choose herself on the days when no one else did. Months later, she met someone who didn't feel like a chase, but a match. It wasn't fireworks, she told me. It was peace. And it terrified me because I wasn't used to that kind of love. That's the paradox. When you're finally ready for soul-level love, it may not feel dramatic. It might not come with high highs and emotional whiplash. It might feel steady, gentle, like still water after a storm. And that's what confuses so many people. They think love must feel like chaos or butterflies or a deep craving. But those are the echoes of attachment, not the language of the soul. Soul love doesn't consume you, it grounds you. But you can't receive it if your hands are still clinging to illusions. If your life is crowded with relationships that are almost but not quite. If your thoughts are tangled in stories of unworthiness, fear, and scarcity. Soul connection needs space to root. And that space only opens when you begin clearing out what was never truly yours. Think of it this way. You can't plant sacred seeds in soil overrun by weeds. You must pull the old narratives from their roots. You must let the old patterns crumble. You must be willing to be alone, not because you failed at love, but because you are preparing for a love that doesn't ask you to become less. And sometimes the hardest part of this preparation is the quiet, the in-between, the space between letting go of what wasn't real and not yet knowing what will be. In that space, many people retreat. They run back to old partners, old stories, old selves. But Sagittarius, that space is sacred. It is where the shift happens. It is where your frequency recalibrates. It is where your soul says, I am ready to be met. You don't need to be perfect to receive this kind of love, but you do need to be present. Present enough to know who you are when no one is watching. Present enough to catch yourself before you fall into old patterns. Present enough to ask, am I making this choice from love or fear? From desire or desperation? From wholeness or hunger? The person who is meant to meet you on this level will not arrive to complete you. They will arrive to reflect you. But reflection can only happen when you've become clear enough to recognize your own image. That's the invitation now, not to find them, but to find you. Not to attract love, but to embody it. Soul-level love appears when you no longer need someone to prove your worth. When your joy isn't contingent on being chosen. When your peace doesn't depend on their presence. When your life is already so rich with purpose, creativity, stillness, and truth, that love becomes the complement, not the cure. It's easy to say you're ready for that kind of love. But the truth is, not everyone is willing to become who they must be in order to receive it. It requires shedding the masks, leaving the games, sitting in the discomfort of your own becoming, and choosing over and over again to love yourself in the places that used to feel unlovable. That is the path. That is the soil. That is the only condition this kind of love can grow from. So ask yourself, Sagittarius, if this soul connection showed up tomorrow, would I be ready to recognize it? Or would I push it away because I'm still holding on to what I thought love was supposed to look like? If the answer shakes you, good. That means you're waking up. That means you're already becoming who you need to be, not for them, but for you. Because the love you've always searched for is not something you chase. Something you grow into. And when it appears, you'll know not because it changes you, but because it meets the version of you that no longer needs to be changed. Gate 4. Knowing the difference between true love and its imitation. Sagittarius, before you meet the love that stays, the one that sees through your layers, that speaks your soul's language, you will meet its imitators. And these imitations are not always cruel. Sometimes they arrive with warmth, promises, even moments of deep connection. But eventually you will feel it. The subtle misalignment, the energy that doesn't quite land, the conversation that brushes against your truth but never truly reaches it. These connections may teach you, stretch you, even hold you for a while, but they are not meant to stay. And recognizing this difference is one of the most important initiations on your path to soul-level love. So many of us were taught to settle for love that looks good on the outside. We were told that a partner who is good enough should be enough. That chemistry means connection. That shared values mean shared depth. But here's the truth. Imitation love often mirrors what you think you want, but it cannot nourish who you truly are. It gives you comfort, not resonance. It offers safety, but not sanctuary. And it can leave you more alone than being alone ever did. I've worked with many Sagittarius souls who said the same thing. I thought it was real, until it started making me small. That's the red flag we don't talk about enough. Not just conflict or incompatibility, but the quiet shrinking of your truth. When you start withholding your deepest thoughts because you know they won't be understood. When you stop expressing joy fully because it feels too loud for them. When you apologize for your emotional depth, your spiritual hunger, your wild questions. That's not love. That's you negotiating pieces of your soul just to stay connected. Imitation love is often bright, intense, even addictive. It comes with high highs and confusing lows. It makes you work for closeness. It leaves you wondering if you're too much or not enough. It offers you affection, then pulls away without warning. It uses silence as punishment. It leaves you explaining your needs like they're unreasonable, begging for crumbs of intimacy, holding your breath for the next good moment. You begin to mistake emotional chaos for passion. You begin to equate longing with love. But Sagittarius, love that confuses you, love that drains you, love that silences you, is not your home. True love, the soul-level kind, feels like oxygen after too long underwater. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to explain why you cry at the moon or write poetry in the margins of your thoughts. They just get it. Not because they're perfect, but because their heart recognizes the landscape of yours. There is space in their presence, for your fire and your stillness, for your questions and your silence, for your grief and your joy. And most of all, true love never weaponizes your sensitivity. It doesn't make you feel like you're too emotional, or too complicated, or too hard to love. It holds space for your contradictions. It invites your whole being to exist. It doesn't confuse peace with boredom or mistake depth for drama. It knows that love is not measured by how much you ache, but by how deeply you are met. And when you're met at the soul level, you don't feel like you're walking on eggshells. You feel like you've come home. I remember a Sagittarius client, Matteo, who spent years in a relationship that looked ideal to everyone around him. But he always felt like he was performing, toning down his creativity, avoiding spiritual conversations, laughing at jokes that didn't touch him. I kept telling myself I was lucky, he said, but I never felt known. The turning point came when he met someone who saw his art and didn't just compliment it, they understood the meaning behind it. Someone who didn't just listen to his stories, they felt them. That was the difference. And he knew then that what he thought was love before was only proximity, not connection. So how do you tell the difference? Imitation love requires effort to maintain. Soul love creates space to breathe. Imitation love needs you to adapt. Soul love needs you to return to yourself. Imitation love is loud but shallow. Soul love is quiet but infinite. And here's the most important truth. The presence of love does not mean it's real. Its effect on you does. If love leaves you confused, small, unseen, it's a teacher, not a partner. And you are allowed to thank it and let it go. Don't be afraid to walk away from something that once held you. Letting go of a maybe creates space for a yes you didn't know existed. You are not being dramatic when you want depth. You are not asking too much when you want to be truly known. You are asking for what your soul remembers is possible. And that memory lives in you for a reason. It's not fantasy. It's a compass. So be brave enough to choose clarity over confusion, to choose peace over drama, to choose love that expands you over love that exhausts you. You will know the difference, not because the world will applaud it, but because your own body will exhale. And that exhale will sound like truth. Conclusion: the love that stays, the self that returns. Sagittarius, the love you've always searched for was never a fantasy. It was a memory your soul carried, a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Along the way, you've met versions of love that taught you, stretched you, even wounded you. But every almost love, every ache, every silence you endured, they were not detours. They were preparation. They were the gentle, sometimes painful reminders that your heart was never meant to settle for what doesn't meet it fully. You are not too much. You are not too deep. You are not too idealistic. You are awake. And that longing in your chest, the one that refuses to go quiet, is not a weakness. It is your inner compass, guiding you back to yourself and forward to what is real. The soul connection that doesn't leave does exist. But it only arrives when you've stopped abandoning yourself. When you've stopped trying to be chosen by those who never knew how to hold your fire. When you've begun to walk through the world already loved, by yourself, by life, by the stillness you once ran from. This isn't about finding the one. It's about becoming someone who no longer mistakes closeness for connection, who no longer performs to be loved, who no longer apologizes for their brilliance. You are that someone now. And the love that matches that version of you, it will not make you chase. It will meet you. Quietly, clearly, completely. So take a breath, Sagittarius. Trust the unfolding. Share this with someone else still remembering. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. For there is so much more truth, light, and soul-level resonance waiting to be spoken. Together we remember.